Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Stormy B Man from the Stormy B Man channel, and this is the Three Wise Men of Boxing for Saturday, April 27th. And I want to say good morning to everybody that's out there in the chat, everyone that's listening to us live. Uh, Today, again, we have with us the panel of Scrapbook Boxing and Kurt Sugar. I want to say good morning, brothers. Would you like to say good morning to everyone and introduce yourselves?
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Okay, go ahead, Scrap.
Sorry, brother. Good morning. This is Scrapbook Boxing. I want to say good morning to all my subscribers, all my viewers, and everyone in the channel. Salute to everyone.
Good morning, everybody. This is Curtis Anderson, aka Kurt Sugar. You can find me on World Breaker Fighting. I have my own show under the World Breaker Fighting banner. Kurt Sugar versus the World. Hardcore boxing talk. And we have our own show. Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Boxing. Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock Eastern. We're here to talk some boxing. We want you guys to get involved. So it's always nice to be here with two boxing scholars. You heard from Scrapbook and Stormy B Man. Salute to everybody.
Salute, brother.
Yes, sir. This is our second episode that we're sharing with the listeners out there today, and we seem to be coming off of a very strong week where we were on people's tongues this week, fellas. I want to say salute to you, brothers, for embarking on this journey with me. I thought it was a good idea to bring a format out where two gentlemen who really know the sport and have a wealth of information and experience in the sport to share with people who are casuals as well as diehards. So I appreciate you all joining me on this endeavor. How's it been over this week for you guys? Coming off of the pilot episode, I would say.
It's been very informative to me specifically because I had an opportunity to tune back in. And if I'm in the audience, I'm very pleased at what took place. I think it's a great show, a great format, a great opportunity for all of us to get together to pretty much show how we feel about boxing and to be able to allow the audience to dialogue with us and ask us questions. So I was very pleased with the last performance that we displayed last week.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. This is a great platform, man. I mean, I'm very pleased. I would never thought, in 1,000 years, you could have a platform where you can brotherhood with people from different cities and different states. When I first got on this platform, I didn't know what to expect, and then everything just blew, just spread like wildfire. It's great. We ain't always going to agree, but we can agree to disagree. It's a brotherhood. The movement is strong. You have a platform you can stand behind your fighters. People voice their opinions. And that's how you learn. That's how I learn, by listening to people and people voicing their opinions and their take on this and that. So it's great. So we're really flooding the market, which is a great thing, man. The movement is strong, and we're here, man. And it's a great channel. I give credit to Stormy B, man, for putting this together. Scrapbook, man. You want to learn, man? Scrapbook, man, channel, man, is just like it's like taking a test, man. It's like going to Harvard Law School, man, of boxing. It's great, man. So hey, I'm just here for the ride. You guys give me a lot of accolades. Thanks, for the accolades. And hey, man, like I said, in life, you learn something new every day.
Yes, sir. We got a few people out there with us already this morning. World Breaker, say good morning to World Breaker, Abel Mahari. Ahmad is Ahmad. Mark Pinkerton. Barton South, D-Town, what's up? Bodru Thibodeau. These are some of the people that were riding with us last week, fellas. And it's nice to see that they're back with us bright and early today. So that's a good thing. Um, Scrapbook, do you have anything? I know what we are going to discuss this week, but did you have anything that you may have brainstormed and just want to kind of like throw out in the water early on this morning as we begin to kick things off?
Yeah, one of the things that I learned in live streaming, that was my second live stream, by the way. The first one was on Wordbreaker. Good morning, Wordbreaker. Salute to you, brother. Salute to everyone in the chat. Was that when you pay attention to details and you really examine what's being asked as far as questions are concerned and the dialogue that's going on, you learn something. You know, you have to put your ego down. You have to put away your ego and you have to say to yourself, I'm here to learn something and get something from what's being said to you or through you. And I did that last week and I felt a lot better about doing that. So I think these sessions are very important. And I'm going to start doing that myself. I'll start having some live streams on my channel.
Yes, yes. How about you, Kurt?
Well, I'm all over the place right now. I got this show, like I said, my World Breaker every day, sometimes twice a day. I have my show, so I'm like I say, I'm happy, man. I'm happy where I can come, and spread my knowledge, and which is always a great thing, man. And when I get straight, I'll probably have my own channel, under World Breaker, whatever. And it's just great. It's just great. So I'm happy, man. I'm happy. It goes beyond boxing, man. Like I said, it's a brotherhood. I meet different guys, man. We laugh and joke, and that's always a great thing. We talk behind the scenes, so it goes a lot farther than boxing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree.
And Scrap, it's funny you said that you know it had only been your second live stream that you participated on. The only thing I have to say about that is that really shows how much needed formats like this are, because a person with the knowledge that scrapbook boxing has and the information that he could share and everything, that shouldn't be silenced. People should be chomping at the bit to ask this gentleman to come out and share. If you just go to his YouTube page, you can see how much he's dropping out there. It's like volumes. It's like encyclopedias of information for boxing purists. And sometimes people don't know what direction to be pointed in, and that's why, like, I thought something like this would be a way of creating another path. I'm not trying to do anything any better than anyone or anything. I'm just trying to open up more windows and doors. That's all. Let that breeze flow in so we could all smell that fresh air. And that's and I believe by doing that, other good things can happen as well. So it's like, I just wanted to say that as much as I could do to help push your name out there, push that content that you're sharing with the masses out there, I'll do that. You know what I mean? Because we need it. I tell you something. I am so grateful that I've stumbled upon this network work and this form of being able to discuss boxing 24/7, because it's sure not on television like we would like it to be, even though television is the longest uh, public media where you have access to something where you can turn something on. I mean, actually, it's radio, but even radio has far less than television when it comes to boxing. So the fact that we can tune in and we have platforms, the LDBC is doing this wonderful thing with all the shows that they run 24/7. And then there are other boxing programs out there too, to be able to do this, and that you can get on and off whenever you want to, but it's some boxing happening somewhere 24/7. That's a wonderful thing. And a person like Scrapbook and what you have to offer, it should be out there and be made publicly known and aware that that's out there, so people will have even more to absorb. So I just want to remind the audience, the listening audience, that this stuff is out there for you, and don't be afraid to tap into it because it's good stuff.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. One of the things I was waiting on before I started the live stream was to get a few more subscribers. And that's kind of like what I was waiting on. So we'll see what happens.
And by the way, if you are not subscribed to Scrapbook and you're out here listening today, please take a moment out to go and subscribe to his channel, because that doesn't cost anything. You can go out there and give a look see after this program is over. And I'll tell you something, you'll find something and someone at some weight class in the sport that you didn't know anything about, and you'll be glad you did. You stumbled across that information. So please uh, subscribe to Scrapbook Boxing. We have another person that just joined us. Broderick Hunter is out there. Muhammad is the one. Salute. These gentlemen are rolling in. They checking us out. Kurt, did you think that we would see a time in the sport where not only, like, because we have so many titles, but with the number of champions, did you ever think that there would be a point in the sport where we would see that the contenders don't even want to fight each other? Like, we know that champions don't defend against each other, and we also know that the networks prefer there to be multiple titles, because when you have a unified title, that means there's somebody on a network or contracted with a network that's not a champion. So did you ever think that it would be like slow motion amongst the contenders like it's become now? I'm noticing that that's a growing thing.
No, man, not in a million years. I'm just cut from a different cloth. I come from a different time period, man, where the top contenders fought each other on their way to a championship fight. You know, nowadays fighters want a shortcut. They don't fight, you know, top contenders. They want to go shoot up straight to the championship. And sometimes they're hesitant, you know, just like the Luis Ortiz and Joshua situation, you know. It's very disheartening, man. You know, when you see top contenders don't want to hone their skill or their craft, and you do that when you fight tough competition. You know, so when you think about the Andrades and the Charlos and the Tanks, you know, these fighters have tremendous ability, but they're not getting in the ring with top contenders. You know, there's a lot of red tape, you know, politics, red tape and all that BS, but these fighters are not uh, the fighters that I'm used to seeing. You know, I can name fighters that were tough, but that wasn't talented, but they were tough. You know, you had fighters, man, like Randy Shields and Doug DeWitt and Murray Sutherland. You know, they fought any and everybody before they got a title shot. You know, they paid their dues, so to speak. And it's a generation thing. You know, the older I get, I see a weaker generation, and that's in life and boxing as well. You know, but what are you going to do? It's just like music when you're used to, you know, hearing stylistics and the Temptations and Blue Magic, and then they come out with these groups and these singers today that can't hold a candle to these guys, and it's the same thing. It's no different in boxing. You know, before. You know, Hearns, and you have fights like Tommy Hearns versus James Schuler that was on the undercard of Marvin Hagler and John the Beast Mugabe. That would never happen. It was for the regional title. Back then, USBA and NABF, you were regional titles. It was a junior title, and if you secure and won that title, then you got your big shot. It was structured differently. The boxing pyramid, I'll call it, but it's no longer like that today. You know, these guys are just contempt of fighting the number 14 contender and then taking a year off and then doing it all over again and then want a shot and complain. So I'm not happy about that.
Yeah. What about you, Scrap?
Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, the last show we had, I kind of tapped on that. And that's one of the issues that we have. You know, we don't have stability. We don't have any direction in the game. And if they're allowed to get away with it, they will. That's the problem. And we as viewers, we are trying with these networks to show what we feel about it. We're trying to bring out the points of what's right and wrong, but at the same time, for some reason, the dollar starts continues to leave our wallets. And we just shut all that down. Eventually, that will change. But it's very difficult when you have a love for something.
Yes, indeed. Um, I have put it to the chat that if they have any questions to ask you gentlemen while we're on this morning, to please ask away. I'll continue to run that little statement out there, but we haven't had any questions for you this morning yet. And I'd like to also state to the chat, please take the time while these gentlemen are available and accessible to you to ask the questions, particularly when you want to talk the history of the sport or comparative notice for what's going on today as to opposed to an different era, to take that opportunity to do so, because these gentlemen can enlighten you on that. We kind of know what's happening, the news of the day, like these contract problems and negotiations, but we're not really here to talk that as much as we are the purity of the sport. Um, I was asked last night on the Friday night chop session a question about my personal favorite fighter and why he was my personal favorite fighter. And it's funny because for the audience last night, that question came up, and I had the time to explain that. But one of the things I wanted to put out there about that this morning is that I don't always base, falling into favor with a fighter or claiming them as a favorite by surface matters with the fighter, meaning like, oh, he might have, nice flair. He might have fast hands. He can move well. He's got good body movement. He throws fast combinations, good combinations, things like that. It's usually, for me, it goes from character instincts, and it builds outward toward their talent, because usually the more solid the individual is inside, it's reflective in how they perform and execute outside. Would you gentlemen agree with that? I'm not asking you to agree with my take on it, but when you look at the depth of a fighter and you align yourself with him or associate yourself with, why do I like this guy? What is it about him that draws me to it? It's not just that he knocked people out or whatever, but can you speak to me and the audience about how do you uh, take a fighter in and take him or claim him as someone that you could get behind and support?
Sure, I can answer that question. My top 10, top 15, top 20 is all based on fortitude. It's all based on character, adversity. That's how I judge them. And the men that I select all have that. In the time in which they came, what they had to overcome in order to get to where most guys are right now, to even get to that point. So fortitude, testicle fortitude is a character, adversity. Those are the things that I look at when I channel into any person, particularly a fighter, because you have to have those attributes in order to be the best that you can possibly be. So I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, my take on it, I agree with you. Excuse me. What draws me to a fighter is his pure skill. Some fighters are lucky to have God-given ability. Their skill jumps out at you. Charisma, a certain type of swag, a confidence that they know they're going to win. Like my man Scrapbook says, fortitude is another one. So it's a plethora of many things. Character in general. When a fighter is confident, he walks a certain way. He thinks he can beat the world, and I like that. That's the attitude you're supposed to have. Like look at Muhammad Ali. A lot of people never talks about his swag and his confidence, man. He just thinks highly of himself, not being condescending, because that he wasn't. But you supposed to have a certain attitude. A fighter supposed to have a certain attitude. Sugar Ray Robinson with the conch in his hair and the suits and the convertible pink Cadillac driving down 125th Street. I love that. He just knows a fighter is sure of himself. So that's what draws me to a fighter. Jack Johnson, with the tailor-made suits, listening to classical music back in them days. So them guys had it together. They were men. And not only they fought like it, but they lived like it.
Yeah. Hey, guys, we have a question in the chat from Muhammad is the one. Salute, Muhammad is the one. He says, question for Sugar and Scrap. Do you fellas believe that boxing is not an undefeated sport, and that these young boxers of today are stuck on being undefeated? I believe you gain notoriety by losing a fight. What do you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Absolutely correct. Absolutely. There's a stigma for some reason that if you lose a fight, you're not a good fighter or you'll lose money. And that's not what it's about. The game of boxing is to overcome, to be able to bring out the best in one. And a lot of times it takes a defeat in order for that to happen. Now, not necessarily in all cases, but that shows the mark of a man or woman. If you have a bad moment, sometimes you need a little kick in the butt to really wake you up and say, wait a minute, let me get back on track. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a failure or you're less than because you take a defeat. It's part of the game. You can't have two winners. They used to have 15 rounds to make sure you had a winner. So someone has to lose. And it's a matter of who pushes out the hardest, who digs down the deepest. And sometimes it's just not your night. So it's not the end of the world. But boxing, that's what boxing is. One loses, one wins.
Muhammad's the one. That's a very good question, my brother, man. Muhammad's the one. Me and him chalked it up behind the scenes. I haven't spoken to him in a while, one on one. He's a good brother, man. That dude is very intelligent. You can lose and still win, and I don't really believe in more victories. But in these cases, what I'm about to mention, these men lost the fight, but they gained so much respect, and they came back and won. When Sugar Ray Leonard lost to Roberto Duran in June 20, 1980 in Montreal, before that fight, people were still doubting him. They looked at him as a pretty boy. So he wasn't really, with the hardcore boxing community, they knew he was good, but they didn't know how good. So when he lost to Duran, he got respect and adulation all throughout the world, because I knew he was going to win the second fight. People didn't know how tough he was. And I always said this: if Leonard didn't have that tough fight with Duran, he wouldn't have never beat Tommy Hearns in the first fight. So he got better, and he got respect. Like Evander Holyfield against Riddick Bowe when he lost his title. Man, I took my hat off to Evander, when he lost to Riddick Bowe, because he showed you he was a great fighter. When you can go look at that round 10, that's his career in a nutshell, and show you how tough he was. Bernard Hopkins, when he went to Ecuador, and he was knocked down twice against a fighter named Segundo Mercado, and he came back. They fought a rematch in D.C., and Bernard, beat the brakes off of him, knocked him out in 6. So these are just some of the examples that, in a loss or a draw, that you can come back. It's not, you're not going to get stoned to death if you lose a fight. People blame Floyd, but that's not his problem, because Floyd came up the hard way. He went undefeated. He had to fight those fights. Don't worry about that. You You take control of your own career. If you lose, then you ask for a rematch. And that's why I'm glad we're gonna have Charlo and Harrison. See, that's a throwback. The situation itself. Charlo lost, even though I felt he won. Now he's fighting for his belt again. So kudos to Tony Harrison for giving him the opportunity.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about that too is this. It used to be when a fighter was being put on the path with professional boxing, uh, he would he would go through increments of growth by facing certain types of styles, certain types of adversity and circumstances, even when it meant traveling into hostile territory. All of these things will fortify this fighter who was being built as a possible contender, so that when he became an actual contender and a challenger for a title, he would have enough of experience to get in there and not only win a title, potentially win a title, but if he did end up on the positive side of attaining a title, he would be able to defend a title and have a reign. Um, and just to pad one's record with knockout after knockout after knockout, it's nice, and we say this all the time, it's nice to have the knockouts, but it's better to have the experience of fights and rounds. To go rounds, meaning that there's something transitioning during those rounds. There's an experience taking place during those rounds. So fighters who put in a lot of rounds and have fought a lot of different styles, and maybe a guy maybe had never had a cut before, or maybe not have come out of a fight with an injured hand or something, or even just a guy who was you hit him with everything you got and he's still there and he's going to take you the distance. Those are the kind of things that could play in favor of someone who's going through the learning process, because in a championship fight, a lot of times all of that can happen on that night, because in a championship fight, that's at the sports elite level. All the lights are on, all the eyes are on you, and there's pressure. And so that's why one of the things that a prospect through that learning process, he garners all of this type of experience. So when he does get on that world stage, he's able to compete on that world stage. I think some of the fighters that are being prepared and pushed toward contention in this modern time, that little bit of the element has been forgotten significantly, because we have a lot of guys who end up with good records, so to speak, but the records don't really reflect the experience or their capability. Would you gentlemen agree with that?
I agree 100%. And
Absolutely.
to piggyback on that, boxing, I think, is the only sport. Now, you have grappling, you have wrestling, you have all these different uh, sports, but boxing is the only sport where something is going to go wrong. And you have to settle that with your fist. You can't eye gouge. You can't hit somebody in the knee, in the groin. You have to punch him. It's the only way you can solve that problem. There's no other sport someone can come to me and tell me that will replace boxing. It cannot be done. Excuse me. Because boxing, you have to use your mind. You have to use your heart. And we all lose in boxing, but it's what you do when you come back. In the middle of a fight, you have lost. But it's coming back is what makes you a victor, whether you win or lose at the end of the day. And boxing does that. And if you really pay attention to the sport, you'll understand that that's why boxing gravitates to most people, because we deal with that in life every single day, whether it's your boss that you work for, your client that works, in your behalf, or whatever the case is. You always have to go through some trials and tribulations. And boxing is all that balled up in a ball of wax. And that's why I enjoy boxing. It does it all for you.
Yeah, you see, and also part of that, what I was saying about the prospects. See, even if prospects lose a fight here or there along the way, there's things that could take place. The familiarity of rematching. You know, you lose a fight, maybe you lost a decision, or you lost because a technical decision, you got a cut and they went to the scorecards and you might have been down on the cards. So you build yourself back up by you get out there again, and then maybe a couple of fights later, you take on that guy that you need to get that victory back from. You see, and that again, that's a building point in your career. It's not a minus if you went into a world title championship contesting for a world title and you had a loss or two on your record. Is how you lost and what did you do in the meantime to rebuild off of that loss. And if it did require rematching an opponent, guess what? You're not afraid that if you beat the champion, hey, I'll rematch the champion. Rematches is nothing for me. You see what I'm saying? And it lays the groundwork, which is why, no, having a loss on your record, it is not an end to your career. Matter of fact, some old trainers used to feel like I need to put my fighter through something so he could lose at some point, so he could have the humility of knowing what it's like to have lost and then have the desire to really want to win, to want to overcome and persevere, to be able to say, I got to get that back. I can't let him take that from me. And see, that's something that's sorely missing of today. It is not something that the guys really look toward. You know, we saw it most recently in the fight between the heavyweights, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. Both men were undefeated going in. Both had some kind of tie to the title. Deontay is the WBC champ. Fury was a one-time champion who had defeated the last long reigning champ, but had his title stripped away. So he had not officially lost in the ring. Now they put on a great fight, a lot of drama and everything in there, and an unpopular outcome of a decision and a draw. So the next thing would be is to, hey, let's run it back. The public was invested. People enjoyed the show they put on. And it's like, it's right there for the pickings. But what does one guy do? He doesn't want to go through with the rematch. He finds something else to do. He goes and takes a plane, you know, away from the situation. And see, again, that speaks more about where people are now in the sport, who are participating in the sport, that they don't see the investment. You want people to pay that ticket to see you, but you don't really want to complete the process. You don't want to do the work. And that's not fair to the fans who pay their money, you know. And that's why it's also different from today as opposed to yesterday. Uh, when you, in the past, you go back 20, 25 years ago, not only would that fight be run back, they might be working on a trilogy, you know, but they are built different today.
Hey, Stormy B, man, I just want to piggyback real quick on a question, on a statement that you just made. It's very interesting. The Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight puts me in mind of the Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier in 1971, because they were both undefeated. And in the very last round, one man went down and they both got back up. And it just goes to show you how history repeats itself. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And I want to say something on that. You know, we have fighters today, and I like them a lot. They have a lot of talent. I'm afraid Tank Davis, you better put him in the ring with better contenders, because what's going to happen is he's fighting these contenders. You know, I mean, the Abner Mares thing, that wasn't his fault because Mares suffered an eye injury. But you have to stay active. See, to achieve superstardom or stardom, you have to fight on a regular basis, stay active, and you have to fight tough contenders, man. You know, and as much as we get on Floyd, because I could use him as a measuring stick. Or Andre Ward. They both of those guys went undefeated because they got the best out of their ability. They maximized their ability because they stay active. Well, Ward had the promoter dispute, but somebody like Floyd Mayweather, fought people like Jesus Chavez and Victoriano Sosa and Carlos Hernandez. Those are tough fighters. They're not stars. They're tough professionals. Henry Brucelis, and Floyd, you could just see he already had skill, but he maximized his skill by staying active and fighting top-notch competition. And I remember before he became champion against Chicanito Hernandez, Gennaro Hernandez, people say it was too soon for him. Hernandez was a seasoned pro, man. I believe he was like 38-1, 40-1, long loss coming to De La Hoya, and Floyd dominated him because they threw him out there, either sink or swim. And Floyd swim almost to $1 billion. So Tank, I don't like the way his career is going. I don't like the way Demetrius Andrade career is going because see what's going to happen with those guys. They're going to get a call from De La Hoya and say, hey, you want the Canelo fight? And he's not going to be ready because you can't fight a nobody and then jump over a gate and then land on Canelo's backyard and expect to be victorious. That's the way boxing is structured. And same with Tank. You can't fight nobodies and then get in a ring with a Gary Russell Jr. who's been calling them out now, or Lomachenko, who's been aggressively calling out Tank because they see some fighters know. I better get him now. Now if Tank was fighting Miguel Burchett and top contenders and staying active, Tank will beat him. And that's the way boxing is structured. And a lot of people don't understand that. You have to be ready because you can get that call, from a promoter where, my guy, the top guy in the boxing or in that division wants to fight you, but mentally, and emotionally, you're not ready. So, it's very important. Keep your fighter sharp at all times. Throw him in there. So what if he loses? Throw him in there.
Yes, sir. We got a question from the chat from Big LT Green. He said, after Deontay Wilder's reign, who do you guys see, as the heavyweight on the rise right now, that could be coming up behind him?
I'll take it. I don't see anybody on the horizon, man. Maybe somebody just come out of nowhere, like a meteor. But after Wilder, I don't see anybody, that's coming from the United States. So I see nobody. There's no hype about anybody. I mean, no heavyweight that I see. Maybe somebody, like I said, will surprise one day, and just, get better and then just, talk about a guy, so I don't see anybody.
I think that as far as heavyweight prospects, I think it's the pool is so shallow. I don't think it has enough water in it, at all. Um, Now there seems to be a lot of guys that are from other countries that are starting to come up, but what's interesting is they don't have that background that can propel them to a special class because I do feel a lot of the trainers over here are the cream trainers. I'm not trying to crap on anybody. I'm just saying the record and market for the success of teaching has been primarily over here. And you've seen that by some of our guys here taking guys from there or wherever and making them better than they were. So that's why I make that statement. Would you guys agree with that?
Agree.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Agree. It's just like basketball. Basketball is the world's game because, you have coaches going over to these countries and teaching them, so they're coming over here and taking full advantage. It's the same thing, in boxing. Roy Jones is a Russian citizen. So now these guys are coming over here and they're smart. They're getting American trainers. Kovalev had Jackson. Now he has McGirt. Lennox Lewis came over here and got Emmanuel Stewart. Same with Klitschko. A friend of mine and Stewart trained Klitschko, James Bashir Ali. So now they're learning the game. You got to be careful, teaching these guys because they come in and, take over or infiltrate, but there's one thing, they don't have our rhythmic and perpetual motion.
Okay, we got another question coming from the chat. J.A. Dixon in the chat. Salute this morning, J.A. Thanks for joining the Three Wise Men of Boxing. He says, as Stormy B Man and panel, I have a question. How would you guys rate Ali's defense and fundamental flaws? What fundamental flaws did he have, if any?
Well, Ali's fundamental flaw was keeping his hands down and pulling his head back. That was his fundamental flaw. His defense was basically he had the speed, he has the mindset, he had the IQ to get away from punches. He knew how to set you up, set traps with his foot movement side to side. But his fundamental flaw was basically keeping his hands down and pulling his head back.
That's a very good question. I studied Ali for many years. He can, excuse me, he can be hit with the left hook, Henry Cooper, Joe Frazier, but Ali, he was so skilled and he had what you call nuclear athleticism that fighters that have that can get away with that. Now, I don't, I don't advise, regular fighters to do it. Regular fighters, meaning that they don't have that type of athleticism or reflexes. Roy Jones did it. Muhammad Ali can do it where, you just go straight back in a line. That's a no-no, but when you look at Sonny Liston and when he fought Cleveland Williams, he did it, but he was at his absolute prime. So he's one of the few fighters that can get away with it. That is a fundamental flaw, but when you have that super athleticism like he did, it worked for him. He's the best heavyweight to ever live and one of the top 5 fighters that ever entered the ring, so, his record saying he got away with it, but I wouldn't advise any fighter to do that.
Yeah. Another question. We have the sister Lala D. Good morning and salute to your sister Lala D. She says, "Am I the only one who was really impressed with Danny Jacobs' win in his fight with Deverenchenko? People didn't like his performance, but I felt like he fought really smart. Did you guys have a chance to see that fight? And what are your thoughts of Jacobs' performance on that fight?"
I saw the fight. I wasn't impressed. Shout out to Lala D. Lala D bought me this Sugar Ray Robinson tank top, so I thank her for that. A lot of my friends like it, Excuse me. I collect, boxing t-shirts. I didn't like Danny Jacobs' performance against Deverenchenko or Selecki because Danny Jacobs can be a very good fighter. He has all the tools, but I don't like his mental lapses on defense. I don't like him going to the ropes, and like I just said, fighters, when they get the call, and he got a grand opportunity fighting Canelo next week. Now, if he fights that way against Canelo, he's not going to win, and he has the physical tools, but with Danny Jacobs, is his ring IQ, and his fortitude and his preparation. He could have beaten Triple G. He's better than what he's showing you. He could have very easily beaten Triple G, But it's his temperament. Is he going to freeze next Saturday night? Or is he going to seize the opportunity? Because he has the physicality to beat Canelo. That's the perfect style. But his ring IQ, he has to get better. I mean, he's talking a good game. He said you got to box Canelo, make him use his feet. And I've been saying this for a very long time. But to answer your question, Lala, I didn't like his performance against Derenchenko. Whether that helps him next Saturday, we'll see.
Yeah, first of all, good morning to Lala D, my sister. Thanks for the question. I didn't see the performance with Daniel Jacobs. I know him personally. I met him at the Golden Gloves when he won his last Golden Gloves. And, he even overcame the cancer. My most impressive performance with him was with Peter Quillen. But other than that, I didn't see that last performance to be able to give a good critique on that.
Okay. I want to say, take a moment and just say to everyone that's out there, we've got a few people watching it. Can we get somebody to smash the like button? Can we get people to smash the like button? You're here, you're supporting these gentlemen with this wonderful format and the wealth of information that they have to share with you. Please show that support by smashing that like button. You're out there listening, please smash the like button. We've had a few more people come in and join us, fellas. We are really cooking this morning. We got, I want to say hello and salute and good morning to these following people in the chat. We got Eric Jenkins, Marlo's Corner. What's going? What's good, Marlo's Corner? We got Fans Perspective, uh, Harold Jones. Muhammad is the one who's already been out there. We shouted you out already. Hustler Slim, Cypher Supreme TV. We've got people out here. So people are listening and they're enjoying what you gentlemen have to say. I think we got another question out here. Fans Perspective says, who do you feel is the future 5 years from now? Who do y'all will be the top dog in boxing? Is there anyone you see on the horizon?
Yes. I like Jaron Ennis out of Philadelphia. His nickname is Boots. He has that athleticism plus his pedigree. He comes from a fighting family. He comes from a fighting town, city rather, Philadelphia. Great lineage of fighters. He's a can't miss prospect, but I done seen this before where as a can't miss prospect became nothing but miss. People like Faz Eddie Hobson and Kelsey Banks and Alex Ramos. Devin Haney, who just signed to the Zone, he gets a lot of pub. Teofimo Lopez and Virgil Ortiz and Joey Spencer, but those guys, they look the part, but will they be the part? One straight right hand, a left hook to the chin can change their whole career. Haney fights like an amateur. He a lot of unnecessary movement. He has to learn to settle down. Teofimo Lopez is like really aggressive. He overshoots his punches. These guys and Virgil Ortiz is good, but it's hard to assess them until they fight top level competition. So we can't give them all this credit yet. We have to wait to see how things turn out. My intuition tells me Ennis because he has the most upside. I think he can beat, the bottom half of the contenders in the welterweight right now, but, he has promotional issues. So that worries me. He has a lot of bravado and, a lot of swag, but he has the look of a very, very good fighter and a promising future. So I would say Jaron Ennis of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I agree
like
with Jaron Ennis.
go
Jaron
ahead. I'm
Ennis, I
sorry.
know him.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say I know him and his brothers, and he looks like the truth. Like Curtis said, there's been a lot of prospects in the past that disappointed us. I remember when Tracy Harris Patterson knocked out Hopkins with one straight right hand, and he He thought he was going to be the guy. So you never know with these guys. But Ennis, I believe he's the guy. No question about it.
Okay. Um, I don't have an answer for that question about who can be on the horizon right now personally, because I think there's not enough activity that these guys are putting themselves in a position for me to fully grasp some type of excitement on that. If I were to see, more efforts out of people facing and get being active, I can make a proper assessment. But right now, honestly, I think the future looks more bleak than bright, and it's a result of what's taking place at the moment. But I wanted to take a moment also to give my response to Lala D's first question with the Danny Jacobs. Uh, there seems to be a disconnect with Danny Jacobs in the heat of battle. During a fight, he's not connecting with his corner. And when you don't connect with your corner and you're not listening to instructions and you're not able to execute, that's a recipe for disaster. And he's getting ready to go into probably the most high profile fight of his career right now with Canelo Alvarez. And if that isn't resolved, he's going to run into some big problems because he's going to have to rely upon that second set of eyes to determine, what's working for him in the fight and what's not, and how to better get through what he's facing. I do believe Danny Jacobs is a better fighter than he's showing us, but I don't know what's happening. It's like to me there's something mental going on there. Now he could get on that night and look like a world beater and beat Canelo up. He has that type of potential. But will that happen? I'm on the side of resignation against it happening because he hasn't shown that up to this point, but it's there for him. It's not like he doesn't have it. It is there. But I don't know what he's waiting for. I don't know what he's waiting for. And that's why it's bad, because his fight against Derenchenko, Derenchenko, I have said it in a couple of my other videos, that guy can box. It's like, it might not be a fighter you like. It might not be a fighter you're accustomed to or whatever. He's coming from a different part of the world. But I always like to give credit to people who are capable. And he's definitely a capable fighter. And Danny Jacobs was able to pull out a victory. But he could have been better in his victory. And I see that. But he could be better in a lot of his fights. The way he ended up taking out Kid Chocolate, he could do that to a lot of people, but it hasn't been there for him. Why? I can't answer, but I do know that there happens to be a disconnect with whatever's going on in the corner, and I don't like that at all. What do you guys think about that? That's what I had to offer off of Lala D's first question.
That is
Yeah.
true. Oh, go ahead, Scribe. You can take it.
No, I was just going to say I agree with what you just said. He has a mental lapse at some point, and he doesn't seem to follow the instructions, I think, because of the mental lapse. And that's a problem for a fighter. If you can't trust your brain thrust, you have a problem at some point in your career when you really need him. You're not going to be able to adapt to what he's telling you. And that is the concerning point. It's up to him to fix. He's got to solve that problem. But I absolutely agree. That's a great analysis on that.
Yeah, I want to, piggyback off that, and like I just said about Jacob, man, I know Canelo, man. Like I'm in the gym with him. I've been studying him before he came on the scene. Before Oscar De La Hoya had him, he was with a promoter in Miami. I just thought it was different because when I first looked at him, I said, "Oh, Irish contender." But when he was Mexican, I said, "Oh, wow, okay." So start watching the guy. It's simple. Danny Jacob should be up all night, all day studying film with Aries Landy Lara and Floyd Mayweather. Not saying you're Floyd Mayweather, but you try to implement the same game plan and you study and you study. You made Canelo use his feet. You don't go against the ropes like Jacobs did against Derenchenko and Selecki, because what Canelo does, he sets you up with body shots. He try to break you down. Then he'll throw a double left hook body. He'll go to the body, then he'll bring a hook to the head. So you keep him in the middle of the ring and you make him use his feet, and you make Jacobs use his jab and move left to right. Don't move to the point where the rounds are close, because you're not going to get this decision. So if Jacob does this, he will be very successful next week. But I don't know if he can do that, because I don't trust his ring IQ or his temperament.
Okay. Fellas, we have a second question, which you heard me say, mention and allude in the first question, but we have a second question by Lala D. I was just waiting a moment to get to it. She says, Bob Arum is saying, I see Leonard and Bud, but I've never seen another Loma. Do you guys see Leonard and Bud?
I'll take it. No. Bud is more like a fighter, and Bud is better than him. A little Johnny Bump City Bumpers, but he's more to me of a Mike McCallum style. Mike McCallum fought just like that, in and out. Got hit not too often, but got hit because he wanted to mix it up. Great boxer, highly skilled. Leonard was more of a flashy, charismatic, great fighter. One of my favorite fighters, second favorite fighter. I don't see Bud and Leonard and Bud. I see McCallum and Bud. They're more to me or alike than the Sugar Ray Leonard. They say Leonard because of his name, and Purnell. They like to use those names, but it's to me more of a young Mike McCallum. Throw combinations, in and out. He reminds me of Bud. Bud reminds me of McCallum, I should say. So I would say Bud is more like Mike McCallum.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually a good analysis. Not Sugar Ray Leonard. Absolutely not. Sugar Ray Leonard was a completely different fighter than Bud is. Bud is a very unique fighter for today's game, but definitely not Sugar Ray Leonard. Not at all.
Very interesting, fellas. Very interesting. Um, I know as we talk about these things, it's funny because see, as you can see, people do have, they have their perception of boxing and what they're looking at, and they do have a voice, and they want to ask questions and they want to be heard, because you can't talk boxing with everybody. You have to talk boxing with boxing people. You can talk football, baseball, basketball, whatever with everybody, but not boxing. Because you really sound foolish if you say something like, well, I think that, Amir Khan, is one of the greats. And a real boxing person is going to look at you and be like, what was that? you know, and they know that you don't necessarily know much about you don't know much about the sport, and it's kind of funny. I don't know, but when you talk boxing with boxing people, you can get into a depth of a conversation that casuals they don't have the same. It's not there. Would you guys agree with that?
Definitely, man. You can lose somebody. Boxing is an underhanded sport, man. If you don't know, there's no gray area. You either know it or you don't. And boxing is such a unique, and it has a lot of rich history and culture, and different layers, but and certain fighters are great, but they're obscure. You can't talk Sam McVeigh and Joe Jeanette and add wall gas to people. They're gonna be like, what? People, they know the stars, which I understand, Muhammad Ali and the Sugar Ray Leonards and stuff. We all know them. It's the type of sport you're gonna have to sit down and study and look over. I mean, I've been watching for 45 years and I'm still learning. I can never know enough. I learn something new every day. So that's the sport of boxing.
Yeah, boxing, you can't, the sports you name, you play those sports. You can't play boxing. So boxing is a complete different sport. It's a different game, it's a different mindset. And like Curtis said, if you know it or you don't, it's one of the two. There's no gray area. Boxing is just a unique game. It's a different sport altogether. That's why I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, fellas, before we move into our second segment where we get to talking about our top 10 fighters of all time, I want to take a 1 moment break to bring in Hyphy. He has something that he would like to share with the panel and the chat and everyone out there that's listening off of his experience that so far being being a part of the Three Wise Men of Boxing program. So, Hyphy, good morning, brother. Come on in and say what you have to say, please, sir.
Hey, yeah, what's going on to all the brothers on the panel as well as the chat? I want to let Kurt and Scrapbook know last week you guys had, threw out some fights towards the end of the show. And I want to let you guys know that what you guys did, it was definitely productive because at least one person went and watched those fights, which was me, myself. So just know what y'all saying is not going unheard. And I'm actually watching those fights that you guys are throwing out there. So I want to kind of do just a little quick recap and get some more of you guys' thoughts. The first fight that I watched, which was the same day after the show, was the Bobby Chacon versus Bazooka Lamont fight. And man, that might be the greatest fight I've ever seen, honestly. That fight was hella interesting. So I was doing a little bit of research. That was a fourth time fighting. The fight that you guys put out there, I know they had split one and one was a no contest, I believe. But that was a hell of a fight, man. I just want to see some more of you guys' thoughts on that fight first.
Yeah, that was a simmering rivalry. Bobby Chacon versus Rafael Bazooka Lamont. They fought 4 times. The fourth fight being the best fight. That's the best fight I've ever seen in my life. You had other fighters like Rolando Navarrete, Cornelius Bolder Edwards. So it was like a mini tournament. All those guys fought each other. And I'm gonna list some more fights that that you can go and people in the chat and Hyphy, thanks a lot. That you guys can go and watch. You had fights like Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Yaki Lopez 1 and 2. Watch those fights. Once again, Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Yaki Lopez 1 and 2, and Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Richie Cates. Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Lati Mawali. That's Mawali, Mwale. But the Chacon and Lamont rivalry, fight of the year is an all-time great fight. So I'm glad, you watched it. And, it's just a treat that we have these fights that we can go and watch. You don't have to buy the DVD. You don't want to. You can watch them on YouTube because people always upload fights every day.
Yeah, Hyphy, salute to you, brother. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, my brother? Want to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thanks for the compliments. I do appreciate that. I think we're trying to do this so that we can enlighten the audience and the fans on other things that they can view and get a better perspective on the game. But, Marvin Johnson and Matthew Saad Muhammad, you can check that fight out as well. And I think the reason why we're listing some of these fights is because it wraps up the point we're trying to make as far as the fortitude and the desire and the hunger and what boxing really has to offer. So those are some good fights for you to check out. So thank you very much for participating and giving us those nice compliments. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, I seen in my assessment is, Chacon, it was not like he was the most skilled fighter, but he won that fourth fight, just off of heart. Bazooka, he has like a funny style because this is a dude that is, taller and has longer arms, but he's not much of a jabber. That dude got these wide hooks, but man, when he let them hooks go, that dude is a wrecking ball, coming with them hooks because he let a lot of them go. He don't just throw one or two. So that just made the fight interesting. I could see how that style could be very difficult. But just watching that fight, it was a 15 rounder, and then to see how it ended at the end, I was like, man, that just sealed it for me as being the best fight I ever seen, honestly.
That's what's up. I'm glad you took time out to watch. I got another couple of fights for you. This fight was over a woman, to believe it or not. It
Hey,
was in
Kurt,
Los
Kurt, Kurt,
Angeles.
Kurt, hold
Yes.
on a second. Uh, what we'll do, keep the thought on that fight you're gonna drop, because we'll drop the fights at the end of the show.
Okay.
Yeah, that way, we can flow into everything, and then we can leave our audience with the fights that you recommend. That's why I wanted Hyphy to come out there and tell the people, because this is a young man out here, everybody, who had took it upon himself to actually go out and do what our panel, suggested. Hey, just go back and look at some of these old fights. They're there available to you. And you're talking about 15 rounds, man, not 12. Okay, 15 rounds. And you think you were seeing something inside of 12. When you go through that 12 through 15, that really separates the men from the boys, really. And you talking about guys being in condition. I mean, that's where it's really laid on the line. So here we have a young listener and a young supporter out there who's actually done some footwork, and now he's a part of that. He wants more. And see, that's all we're trying to do. Boxing it has so much history that living in the present is just not good enough for you. It's not. And I'm not saying if you want to stay in the present, that's what you shouldn't do. I'm just saying take a look back. Just take that closer look back, and I guarantee you will find something that you can adopt for yourself and say, man, well, this is what I like to see. You understand? Because a lot of what we seeing on TV and what's on pay-per-view and what's on the broadcast of today is not really the best of what the sport has to offer. It is not. And I just wanted to say that. Do you fellas agree?
I agree.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
The
So
last
go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Hal.
the last point I want to just make about that fight before I move on to the next one. It was also interesting. I don't know if you guys caught it, but there was one round where Chacon, the ref had to go look in, Chacon's corner, because I basically he let his corner know, hey, I need to see more from this guy or I'm going to stop the fight. And then in the very next round, they had to go tell Lamone the same thing. I just thought that was amazing. But the other fight that I watched, and this is a good point, and I don't see these type of fights anymore because these are like two, journeymen. I would say the Cicero versus Caveman Lee. These are two guys who never reached that top fame, but they just went out there and they just fought, and they happened to give me the best round I've ever seen in boxing. That fifth round when it ended, that was a great round also.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and by the way, that Bobby Chacon and Bazooka Lamone, the fourth fight, was the fight of the year. So there's some great fights out there, and we're very happy you're taking the time to take a look at them.
Yeah, see,
Definitely.
and here it is again. Like I said, this is a young person that has done the footwork and went out there for themselves and tried to see exactly. Let me see what these old dudes talking about. And he found something, and he found some fire. You see, that's all. And we're just trying to open your minds up to that, because my goodness, I had the fortune of, like, I grew up in a boxing household, like my fellow panelists have done. And so I got a chance to see a lot from a young age. You understand? And growing up with that, and then becoming my own man, and deciding what I like, as opposed to what's just available. And because I saw so much more, it gave me a broader perspective of what I'm looking at. And I'm quite certain that I can speak for the panelists that it did the same for them. When you grow up with that, and then you begin to determine what you like for yourself, but you have the experience of what was presented, what a broader perspective, you can see more, you take in, and you're also more likely to venture out and explore more.
Yeah, I'm going to sign off. But before I sign off, I want to just go ahead and say, that's not the only other fight that I watched that was an older fight. But most importantly, just to the people listening, look, I'm a dude. I like watching the fights. I understand everybody here is a boxing fan, but it's way too many people that get caught up in the politics and just spending so much time online arguing about the wrong stuff. If y'all get that bored, go watch the fights. If y'all love boxing so much, go watch the older fights. Stop worrying and complaining about the new fights that are just horrible. Go watch the older fights. That's the best thing to do. It's a lot more stuff to learn. Appreciate the history of the sport.
All right, I appreciate you, Hyphy, for coming on and sharing that little bit of experience that you took from last week's show with us. Much respect to you. So, brothers, the three wise men of boxing, you want to move forward to that next segment where we had advertised our personal top 10 of all time in the sport.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Are you
Make sure
gentlemen
there's
ready
no.
to talk on that?
Definitely. I'm
Okay.
gonna. Okay, Stormy.
No, I'll say okay. I guess we can. Do you want to? Who wants to take it first? I mean, this is one of those things I'm kind of excited about it, so I don't know how we gotta. Let's just dive in. I mean, I could go first.
I mean, I could take it. I mean, I'm excited too, bro. Because I'm always excited about the top 10. I got my list, man, and I'm like, wow. It's hard because there's been so many great fighters. So many. It's like trying to fit an elephant into a Corvette. You gotta leave people off the list, and people they're gonna be like, how is he on top 10 and this one is not a top 10? And that makes for a great argument or debate or just matter of opinions. I'm gonna give you my top 10, but these are the top 10 greatest fighters of all time. Number one, I have Sugar Ray Robinson. He's my favorite athlete of all time, my favorite fighter of all time. He was undefeated as an amateur, in 1951 at the height of his career. I'm not going to break down all the numbers of all the fighters. This is my favorite fighter. He's 132 1 and 2 draws, with 84 knockouts, I believe, man. I never seen such skill, tenacity, wit. He was a warrior. He could have made his fights a lot easier, but he wanted to go to war with Jake LaMotta and the Carmen Basilios, man. So Sugar Ray Robinson, excuse me, is my favorite fighter of all time. I'm just gonna go through the list, so I don't want to take too long. Number two, Muhammad Ali. Number three, Henry Armstrong.
First come out.
Number four, Harry Gregg. Number five, Sam Langford. Number six, Gene Tunney. Number seven, Benny Leonard. Number eight, Archie Moore. Number nine, Tony Canzaneri. And number 10, Joe Jeanette.
That's an impressive list. I'm familiar with some of the names on that list, but not familiar with all of their like the what the nuances of what that made them great. One of the things that I like to say about this list that we have created, our own individual list. It is not to take away from anyone else's impression, but it's our own adopted what the fighters that we would choose as our all-time greats. And of course, there's some quite familiar names on those lists because those fighters are so prominent and gave so much to the sport. So please, this is not something to argue over. I want to put that out there first and foremost. It's not to argue. Oh man, you didn't include this person or that. Why is it not that person on there? That's not what that's about. It's about an individual who has taken what the sport has shown and given them, and they made this assessment based on that. So, Scrap, would you like to go next, brother?
Yeah, Curtis, can I ask you a question? I missed number 3 and number 4 of your selection. Could you repeat those two, please?
Number 3 was Henry Armstrong, and number 4 was Harry Gray.
Got it. All right, thank you, brother. All right, my list, I have number 1, Sam Langford. Number 2, Harry Greb. Number 3, Sugar Ray Robinson. Number 4, Henry Armstrong. Number 5, Muhammad Ali. Number 6, Archie Moore. Number 7, Joe Louis. Number 8, Jack Johnson. Number 9, Johnny Dundee. Tony Canzoneri and Benny Leonard. I have those 3 collectively as number 9. And number 10, I have the Black Murderers Row and the Colored Champions. That's my list.
This is going to quickly turn into my guys can beat your guys. I see this. I'll go next, fellas. I will go in opposite order, okay, from 10 to 1. All right. Okay. On my list, my all-time top 10, I have at number 10, I have Ricardo Benito Lopez at the minimum weight. At the minimum weight. I do pay attention and like the little guys. At number 9, I have Evander Real Deal Holyfield. At number 8, I have Thomas the Hitman Hearns. At number 7, I have Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Leonard. At number 6, I have Archie Moore. At number 5, I have Marvelous Marvin Hagler. At number 4, I have Larry Holmes. At number 3, I have Joe Louis. At number 2, I have Muhammad Ali. And at number 1, I have Ray Robinson. And that's my top 10. And as you see, a lot of them are more contemporary as opposed to some of the guys before 1970. But what I wanted to say, and I don't know, maybe you might understand this as I explain it. My list comes born out of the era of Sugar Ray Robinson, because it seems like once that gentleman came on the scene, boxing really took a different turn. Kurtz mentioned earlier about his charisma and the way that he kind of has some style, and they used to call it the savoir faire. You know, he was a guy who was electric. He was magnetic. And it seemed like almost any and everyone that came after him took some of that for themselves in their own kind of way. And whether it was through the way they fought, whether it was the way that they carried themselves in and out of the ring, whether it was the way that they, they embraced the sport. Because from what I understand, that Ray Robinson didn't really like boxing. He did it, but he didn't really like it. But he was good at it, and he was the best. And there were fighters who came after him that exemplified that too for the current time that they had their careers. The fighters on my list. Archie Moore was a fighter that you know he was avoided so much and now able to fight for a title. I just wonder what it would have been like had he been able to get a title shot earlier in his career, and what type of run or reign would that have been for him? Because he had a style that was very versatile, and it was like he just was he was efficient, he was effective, he had a little bit of his own flair, the old mongoose, and he, back there with Ray Robinson, it's like he coming on the heels of that. It's like he took some of that. He would probably never, openly admit that, or maybe he would. I know that he's deceased now, but Yo Mongoose was something else, and I think that those two fighters on my list with their connection to the past, it just it represents everything that I felt about boxing. And if you notice, I had several heavyweights on my list as well, and that's because there's nothing like seeing those big guys who could really fight and when they're skilled. And I think that Joe Louis, Larry Holmes, and Muhammad Ali are three of the greatest fighters in history that you could just sit down and watch their fights on newsreel, television, videotape, whatever, and just admire them going about their work. So that's what I had to offer on that as far as my all-time top 10, fellas.
I see. I mean, the fighters we have different. Our lists are different, and you can't argue because there's been so many great fighters. If you notice my list, I kind of took it back because those guys were gritty, determined. They fought on a regular basis. In 1917, Harry Grant fought a record 37 times in one calendar year, winning 34. He has the all-time record. He was in 298 bouts. I believe he won 261. Henry Armstrong had 27 straight knockouts. I have Sugar Ray Robinson 1 and Ali 2 because they skill jumps out at you. They were charismatic. They knock you out with style. And they were pretty boys and they can fight. Good looking dudes, man. I loved them in suits and stuff. They had the it factor, as they call it. And they are the two best fighters ever seen. The Ali I seen in 1966, I'm in awe to this day when he beat Cleveland Williams, because I've never seen a heavyweight that could move like that. The flair and it's like he was dancing in the ring, gliding across the ring, shuffling and throwing 6-7 punch combinations. Sugar Ray Robinson was a devastating puncher. Left hook, double, triple left hook would knock you dead. Gene, the hook he hit Gene Fullmer with. So, nobody loses with this list at all. I see Cypher Supreme, he has his list. And I'm upset because I'm like, damn, I gotta take, Joe Gans off the list. Joe Gans was a brutal puncher, had like 100 knockouts. So it's just great to talk about, man. I'm excited, man, because this is me. I love breaking down fighters. I love doing top 10 and top 20s or what have you. So, Scrap has a great list. I see where Stormy B Man was going with his list. It was more contemporary, but I have to give these old fighters shine, the Tony Canzoneris, man. I always thought he was better than Willie Pep, but you wouldn't know that because they don't talk about him. People probably don't know who he is. That was Mike Tyson, one of his favorite fighters. But Willie Pep gets all the publicity, so that I had to put him up in there because he was better. So that's all I have to say for now.
Yeah, guys, I want to first of all say impressive list. I have no arguments with your list. These are all great fighters. The Stormy B, man, you mentioned Archie Moore. And to piggyback off of Archie Moore, that's why I have the Black Murderers Row and the Colored Champions ranked number 10 for that reason. They were not given the opportunities to prove their worth. I mean, you look at fighters such as Jack Blackburn. He had total bouts of 166 with 115 wins. I mean, you're talking about a time where they were told, they were handcuffed. They were told who to defeat, who not to defeat. And if they didn't knock a person out, it would go to a no decision. They had newspaper decisions at that particular time. It was a total different time. Fear was in the eyes. It was in the air. They would be hung. And they still overcame that. And one of the criteria that I have for great fighters is how do you overcome your adversity? What decisions you make, what choices you make. And these fighters did. I mean, Joe Jeanette, 165 total bouts, 119. There's when you look at the record of some of these fighters, a lot of their records are not consistent because they fought more than that. Because boxing was illegal going back in time. I mean, Kid Norfolk, he had like a total bounce of 144 with 111 wins. Joe Gans, 100 knockouts. And at a time where with Joe Gans, I mean, he fought a guy, Casper Ortiz, where they actually banned boxing for 10 years because he beat him up so bad. And this is what was happening to these guys at that time. Charlie Burley, all of these guys, they didn't get the opportunity to win championships or even fight for them. So they had to come out with colored champions. So that's why I have them ranked number 10 collectively, because they deserve to be there.
Yes, sir. That, it's funny. This is why, as we said, you go back and you look at boxing for what it is and you learn more about the history of the sport and everything, because again, you can draw fighters from almost any era when you've studied some of the history to figure out what it is you really like about boxing. And you can align fighters who fit that criteria to your personal preferences, and you heard me say just a moment ago, I love the heavyweights that are skilled. Someone asked about Deontay Wilder. Could he possibly be an all-time great if he would like to finish up 50-0 or whatever? And my response to that, being like, I don't think he could be an all-time great because he doesn't have the skills. If he has skills to equate what he does as far as he's knocking people out, that would be different. But I said, but what he could do, since I think the only person to go the distance with him was Stavern in one fight and Fury in another. If he went on a tear, got that 50-0 record and broke it of Marciano's, and along the way just knocked everyone else out along the way, he could go down as one of the most fearsome punchers in the history of heavyweight boxing. And that would be his alone, to say that. But he would have to get the moving, get active, do these things and accomplish that. But as far as just because he has this record and he's knocked out some folks, but he doesn't have the skills, I could not put him on a level with people who were more accomplished and more capable. Do you guys agree with that?
I do. 100%. And the thing is with Deontay Wilder, he's not in the right era to really make a great assessment on how great he can possibly be. But he's in this era. And I think that's what he needs to do to be put on a certain pedestal. He needs to fight more. He needs to break those records. I can't put him in the top 10. I can't put him in the top 20. I can't put him in the top 30 because of his era that he's in, the record, that he has. Unfortunately for him, it's not his fault. But we're looking at fighters that had well over 200 fights, over 300 fights. Muhammad Ali, look at his record. So that's what's unfortunate. The fighters have to look at history. Where do I want to be placed in history? Yeah, you're going to eat. I mean, money comes and goes. You need money, yes, but if you're talking about legacy, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, when I think of Deontay Wilder, he's along the same lines as Ernie Shavers, Sonny Liston, George Foreman, brutal punchers. He's not highly skilled at all, but when you're a heavyweight and you have that kind of power, you don't have to be. I mean, even Joe Louis got outboxed by Max Mellon and knocked out. As a Charles, he was getting outboxed by Billy Conn. Joe could be hit, but Joe was a brutal puncher, and he did have skill. He was a great offensive fighter, but his impact, his knockout power, and Joe was a patient fighter. I love watching Joe, you know. But you have guys like Joe Louis, Larry Holmes, Muhammad Ali, who were like at the top of the list. Sam Langford too, Sam Langford was like the experience of James Toney and the punch of Mike Tyson. He was a great fighter, but Wilder is like will be remembered for his power more than anything. And ain't nothing wrong with that. Everybody can't be a Sugar Ray Robinson. You got to have God-given ability, but he was given the ability to knock you out. And boxing, that's all that matters. Heavyweights. He became a rich man because of that right hand. He got titanium in there. So hey, and he's gonna go down as having a very good career, and he will be remembered because as soon as you see that name, Deontay Wilder, you can see somebody being stretched out on a canvas. So he's gonna leave a good legacy. All time great, no, but popular, yes.
Hey, Kurt, and Scrapbook. I do have one question from the panel that I did want to try to squeeze in there, and I know we'll be rounding down very shortly, but this is a good question. It's from Bonton South D Town. He said, "Can someone on the panel please explain what journeyman fighter mean for those who don't know?"
Oh, that's a good question, Booten, man. Woo, that's a very good question. Journeyman is a fighter that's reliable but not really outstanding or top notch. Case in point, what's that dude, the drunken master, drunken monkey they call him, Emmanuel Burton, the one who fought Mayweather? He's the quintessential journeyman. Fast Freddie Pendleton, who was a very good fighter. He had double-digit losses, but he was always reliable but not outstanding. He put hands on Pernell Whitaker, gave Whitaker a hell of a fight. Didn't he beat Mayweather too, Roger Mayweather? I think he did. My
Yeah,
memory serves me right. What'd you say, Scrap?
he did. That's the fight that Mayweather had a broken hand, and Jesse Reed and Billy Baxter asked him, "Can you continue?" He said, "I can continue, but I can't throw the right hand."
Right. And another journeyman that I really like, he was, the quintessential journeyman was Darnell Boone, who knocked Ward down and Kovalev. So to me, the meaning is a reliable fighter, but just not outstanding fighter. He's good enough to be in a fight, but not good enough to win it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
journeymen are basically sparring partners. They're guys that a lot of guys have experience with, and you send them on a plane or you send them on a train, give them a ticket, and you tell them, "I need you to be here to fight so and so," and they've done that over and over and over again. Those are usually journeymen. They're in, like Curtis said, they're like B rated, a high C, mid B. They're test for fighters. You got to get past them, and they fight often enough. Club fighters. Those are pretty much journeyman fighters.
and Scrap, wouldn't you say thus the term journeyman because they traveled from this place to that place to put on a show for a fighter that he may have been like the lead guy on the card or one of the lead guys on the card on a particular night, and you needed a body, you needed someone who's capable, who could give rounds, who could give an effort. Would you not agree with that?
No, that is true. That is true. We just got to be careful with that because if you look at Winky Wright, he wasn't a journeyman, but he traveled all over the place before you really know who he was. But yes, that is true. Like I said, you give him a ticket and say, "I need you to be so and so place." Sometimes, just in case this guy does pull out, or is a last minute replacement, but not necessarily all the time traveling all over the place. Because, like I said, Winky Wright is a good example who traveled all over, but he wasn't a journeyman. So,
But to a lesser degree, wouldn't you say that the original term meant like what I
yeah,
said, but as we've gone through time, they
yes,
found a way to say it, and it has it can be devalued in a certain degree, and then fighters who have been labeled that, like a Winky Wright. I never considered Winky Wright a journeyman. You know what I mean? But it's like it's a term that can kind of get associated with someone, and those are the kind of things that'll make a fighter fight harder too, because he doesn't want to be equated with something that he feels that diminishes what he's supposed to be representing. I mean, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
no, 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 you're right, and that's why I was careful. That's why I said we got to make sure we understand that because it can be confusing. But you're absolutely right. Emmanuel Augustus, who Curtis mentioned, he's a club fighter. He basically fights in the Blue Horizon. They can count on him. He's reliable. He's a good test for fighters, and he'll bring the crowd into the show. You had Rock and Rodney Moore. You had a lot of guys like that. But you're absolutely right. The original term was guys traveling all over the place, taking fights, sometimes last minute fights or whatever the case was. But Journeyman today, I think, is basically, he's a star guy in that city, and he can be relied on. He can be, he can test fighters.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um, One of the things that I look at in boxing is like, when they call somebody a bum, and I heard in the chat there someone mentioned explain the difference between fans' perspective. Let me shout him out. Fans' perspective. He said explain the difference between a gatekeeper and a journeyman. And that's one of the things I have a problem with boxing, when they start labeling fighters these terms and don't really know what they mean. So I'm always careful not to say that. But can you gentlemen kind of shed a little more light on that as well, so we can give our audience a broader perspective on how to use these terms when they associate them with fighters?
It's funny. Wow, that's a very good question. That's not much different. A gatekeeper to me is a guy who has star ability, but you know he's not going to win. Case in point, when you look in the dictionary, now you will see Adrian Bruner. It's funny because he's a 3, 4 time world champion. And AB to me stands for always a bridesmaid. You know he's going to come in second. And to me, he's a gatekeeper. A journeyman is, somebody said it. Gil Cole said it. Glenn Johnson, or today's standard would be to me Josecito Lopez. So it's that's a very good question, because I'm trying to find my words, but it's a bit of a complex. They're very similar, but the gatekeeper will have a little bit more star quality, but he's not going to win. And that, like I said, is Adrian Bruner in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's well put, Curtis. I can't, there's nothing, you said it. That's absolutely correct. You got guys that you recognize their name. You never know if they're going to pull it off or not. They're guys like an AB, that's pretty much a journeyman would be Emmanuel Augustus, or, Doug DeWitt back in the 80s, something like that. At one point in time, you had Iran Barkley, who was like that, and he changed that quick with a right hand with Thomas Hearns, and he changed his star quality. But you're right, absolutely right. Those are guys that you can look at as gatekeepers and journeymen.
Yeah. So, fellas, as we look at boxing today, and we have so many champions. Some champions, I feel like, and when I say this, I'm talking about weight classes. Some champions, I feel like, are actual champions, and then others are like belt holders or titleists. And then you have what I call the contender, pretender, fringe contender. And it's like really all screwed up now because you know before you had one champion and you had number one contender through number 10 or whatever. And so those guys in the top 10 that were not the champion, they they sometimes would round robin fight each other or whatever, fight for the right for that number one, excuse me, that number one spot to challenge for the title. The fringe contenders were usually people who were outside of that top 10 or looking to try to break into the top 10 by fighting somebody in the top 10. Um, Now, because you got 4 or 5 titles, think about it like this: the number 1 through 5 contender is more than likely one of those guys to have those belts, those other belts. And now you can see how it gets really messed up because you got the champion, then numbers 1 through 5, who might have one, if not more, of the other titles. And then everybody else out of the last of the top, the bottom half of the top 10, they're not even the top 5. But you got all these belts out there now, and now the guys don't want to fight each other. So fringe contenders, those who are outside of the top 10, can get mixed in, get title shots with some of the belt holders, and people are like unproven. Do you see this mess that I'm trying to paint a picture of? Can you see that? Can you guys cook on
Absolutely.
that a little bit?
Yep.
Yeah, no, to cook a little bit on that. That's the problem. And I like again, the first show that we had with this panel, that's what I was trying to explain to you. And this is the mess that you wind up having when you allow that to happen. You have to keep the fighters fighting. You have to have them face one another. There's enough fighters. You don't have to worry about everybody wind up having a loss or people getting fed up with boxing. There's enough fighters out there. You have to challenge all the fighters. You have to keep them active. You have to keep them interested. That's what keeps the fans interested. That's what keeps them talking on a positive note about the game. And since you don't have that, this is the mess that you wind up having.
Yeah, it's like a mini circus, man. Everything is chopped up into pieces. That's not what boxing is about, man. Pretenders, contenders, belts, and journeymans, and it's a mess, to be honest with you. That's why I try to not talk about it, but it's there. So, it's become sophisticated and complex. It doesn't need to be, but it is what it is. That's the state of the game right now.
I'm gonna give you an example of, if you don't mind, guys, of what I'm talking about.
Go ahead.
Now, my number one pick was Sam Langford. And the reason why I chose him as number one, because here's a man who was 5'7.5 inches. He had a 74-inch reach. All right. He fought from featherweight to heavyweight. Now think about 5'7 inches for a moment. And he fought the best in his era. He had 15 fights with Sam McVeigh. Sam McVeigh had like total bouts of I think it was 96 with 65 wins. He fought George Godfrey. These are all colored champions. Total bouts of like 118 to 95 wins. Jack Blackburn, Joe Gans. Gans had like 196 fights with 100 knockouts or 158 wins, something like that. Barbados Joe Walcott, young Peter Jackson. He lost his colored championship, the welterweight division, to Coco Kid. my number one Puerto Rican fighter. Joe Jeanette fought him 11 times. Tiger Flowers, who wound up becoming middleweight champion, took the title away from Harry Greb in 1926. Fought him once. Dixie Kid, 155 total bouts. Kid Norfolk. Kid Norfolk was one of the greatest fighters in the entire history of the game. He used to train at Grubb's gym. But he had wars with Lee Anderson for the color light heavyweight championship. Jack Johnson, outstanding, 104. I mean, this man chased Tommy Burns all over the world until he caught up with him in Sydney, Australia, 1908, and knocked him out. They didn't even want the cameras to see that. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's Sam Langford's record. He fought hundreds of guys besides that, but I just wanted to give you a perspective. So you don't have that today. I'm not saying that they have to fight all those fights, but you have to fight the very best in your division. And if you can move up, you fight the very best there. You don't have that. And that's why we're having a crisis we're having.
Yeah, that's bad, man. That is really bad. But again, thank you, Scrapbook, for that enlightenment, because it sheds light on like how structure was in place and how they've displaced it by trying to create another means for not the fighters to make more money, but for those to make more money off of the fighters, unfortunately. So
yeah, shout out to Hype. He came up here. I'm sorry, brother. I just wanted to say shout out to him. He came up here and he tried to explain to you. And why he was so hyped up about it, he's realizing that he can't be fooled anymore. Not to say that he was ever fooled, but he had an example of what this thing is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be like, the type of competitiveness that can come out of you. That's what excites him, because that's what boxing does. That's why you see at one point before women were boxing, they used to get up with their purses, swinging it all over the place, hit him. And I was at 200 championship fights, usually front row or the second row. And I would look behind and see the entire arena standing up. I would see the crowd going for one guy, and in the middle of the action, they switch to another fighter because of what he's bringing out of them. And that's what boxing does. It's a reflection of life, adversity, being able to make a comeback. Remember when Kevin Kelly made a comeback against Derek Gainer? I was completely shut. He just swung a right hand and knocked him out. And it takes that at times. And again, you know, there's a lot of great fights out there today, but you don't have the impact that you had back then. And that's the problem we're having. You know, guys are getting away with it, but our dollar will change that if we use it the right way.
I'm gonna tell you something. There's been a lot of damage done in boxing, man. You know, I remember boxing used to be in the front page of the paper. You know, it has taken a dip. The Spence Garcia thing was good, very successful. You know, 360, 400,000. That's the market. Before fight sold $1 million, $1.5 million easy. You know, you need stars in boxing, but you know, you don't have those type of stars because the fighter's not built like that. The best thing about boxing today is it's back on network TV. You know, Garcia and Granados did 1.4, but it can be better. You know, you can stack the cards. You know, but the promoters supposed to work for the fighter, but the fighter works for the promoter. People don't understand that. You know, Ray Robinson always took control of his career because if he felt like he was being cheated, Ray Robinson would tell the promoter, if you don't give me my TV rights money, I'm not fighting. And this is the day of the fight. So he's the, you know, say I'm going to drop out the fight, you know, I'm just going to walk away. So, you know, you didn't want to lose money. So the promoters always gave in to Sugar Ray Robinson. You know, because before Mayweather, you had Robinson. He was getting a lot of money. You know, he was so well respected that gangsters approached him about, you know, throwing a fight. And he said no. So they said, okay, Ray, you know, we just going to leave you alone, you know, just watch you fight. That's respect. You know, today, when you don't put on good shows, the public is going to turn their back. I remember with Fury and Wilder, everybody said, "Oh, it's going to be a stacked card, and you're going to have all these fights, on one card." See, they don't want to do that now because the promoter doesn't want to pay for high profile fights. That's not championship fights, And see, and now you have boxing can be a number one sport because people love violence. People love, the artistry of it. It's a beautiful beast. That's boxing in general. But the promoters and all these people, man, they have done damage to the sport that I love, and I see it. So it can get back. There's going to be a time, I don't know, maybe 10 years from now or 15 years from now, you're going to have a guy that's going to be so popular now because of social media that he will bring boxing back. Like a Mike Tyson, who has that personality and knockout power or speed, like a Ali, that will bring boxing back. But not right now. It's going to be stuck in mud, but it will always find a way to survive.
But you're right, Curtis. That happened with Ali. Before Ali came in, boxing was dying. It was a dying sport. You remember Emil Griffin had killed Benny Kid Paret, and that killed the television ratings. And that was live on television. But Ali brought it back. So you always have these guys that come out, and Ray Leonard, 1977, when he turned professional. They come out and they bring the audience back. But it's interesting you mentioned Sugar Ray Robinson. I just want to touch on that for a second. Ray Robinson, do you know why Madison Square Garden was almost sold out on October 4th, 1940? It was on the undercard of Fritzy Zivic and Henry Armstrong, and that was a 15-round championship fight. Henry Armstrong was defending his title against Fritzy Zivic. And it wasn't because of Armstrong. It was part of it, but it was Ray Robinson. He had just finished the 1940 Golden Gloves, defeating a fighter by the name of Louis Spider Valentine. Now, a lot of people don't know who Louis Spider Valentine was, but he was the guy in Harlem at that time. And he defeated him. And they wanted to see how he did as a professional. So that was his professional debut. From that point on, he was the commodity. And he knew that. And like somebody said, he didn't really like boxing to that degree, but he knew his star power. He could have been a dancer. He was a very good dancer. But he knew where his money can be made. He knew he wanted to be, that's what those suits and the slick hair, he wanted eyes on him. He walked around with an entourage. So he can do that. When Jim Norris, I don't want to take this too far, but Jim Norris wound up becoming the commissioner. And he was tied to the mob. And Ray Robinson, they had brought in the IBC. And that's when he said, okay, I'll belong to the IBC, but on my terms. And that's when he started making those shot calls. But a lot of these guys today have that opportunity because they've been paid for them. They don't understand the reason why they're making this money. It's not them. It has nothing to do with them. It has a lot to do with how this has been paid towards them. And yes, their ability, their star quality and everything else helps that. But they're in a sport that money can be made. Money was never made like that before. And you got to show more appreciation in that. Otherwise, you're going to lose that at some point in time because it's happened before.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on this because it's a great topic. Unfortunately, in 62 changed everything too because you have multiple belts. WBA was the NBA. It came in 62, 63. The WBC came, and then in 83, you had the IBF, and in 88, you had the WBO. So when you start chopping up stuff, it's never good. And multiple promoters, now you have what you call a super champion and a regular champion, in the same division. But see, you can make money, and when somebody try to fix it, boxing will never have a federal commission because a lot of people, money will stop. They don't want that. The promoter wants all the power. This is how he keep things in line. You can, pay for rankings. They used to do it a lot. The guy doesn't deserve to be there. Next thing you know, he's number one mandatory. And I don't want to go too far into it, man. But I know boxing. I try to stay away from the politics, and concentrate on the fights, man. But that's all I have to say about that topic.
Hey, hey, Kurt, that just know that a lot of times the business of boxing, for all these guys want to talk purses and stuff, the stuff behind the scenes, they think they know in boxing. All they gotta do is remember the 5 heartbeats in Big Red, man. My office hours are from 9
Absolutely.
to 5. Open that window, It's like you know
he,
what that means.
yep.
So
You know what's funny about Big Red and the heartbeats, 5 heartbeat? He reminded me of a boxing promoter, and I always said that he had the charisma of one. I always
yeah.
said that boxing business is worse than the drug business.
Well, that's why I mentioned it, because I said to myself, hey man, when it comes down to the real business of boxing, if y'all don't know it, now you know. That's that's the real deal right
Absolutely. You got one on every one. You got one on every corner in your block.
there. Man, it's like that's why it's best to just talk the fighters and the fights like we do. That's it.
Yeah, man, because it becomes depressing after a while, man. It's a mess, man. you know. So that's why I'll be like, I'll talk about the fights and the fighters and live off the past and talk about that. It's great theater, but the politics, man, I'll be like, ah.
Yeah, boxing is a great sport, man, for what it represents on a positive note. You have your gray areas, you have your negative parts of boxing, but for the most part, it's a good uplifter for you. Once a week when you come home from work and you had a hard week, sit down and you enjoy boxing with your friends or yourself. And then you come back the next day to work and you can talk about it. That's how boxing used to be. It's no animosity. It's just a very entertaining game and it reflects life. And, hopefully that comes back again.
Yeah, man, because I'm gonna tell you, the '90s people now they understand what it meant because I remember the '90s and 2000s. Miguel Cotto used to have the Garden rocking. Felix Trinidad had the Garden rocking. I used to go to fight like Ray Boom Boom Mancini and all that at the guard. I mean, it was just great times, man. It was great times, man. Being at the Blue Horizon and Philly or the Spectrum and Philadelphia, man, and watching fights. I mean, boxing is a very compelling sport, and star here and there, and being on network TV. Hey, boxing will be back.
Yes, the very first fight I saw Marvin Hagler was at the Benny Briscoe fight. That was in Philadelphia. And I remember at the end of that fight, he called out Ronnie Harris. Nobody does things like that. Ronnie Harris was from Philadelphia. And he had problems with the Philadelphia fighters, Wilfred Scipion and Boogaloo Watts and all of these guys, Willie Warren Monroe. But he took the challenges and he went to their hometown to challenge them. And he called them out. It's amazing as I look back in boxing history, things that I've seen, things that I've studied, witnessed. It's a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
Yeah, there is so much to explore and to recollect in the sport. I'm just glad we have it. I'm glad that we have you brothers to help continue to bring it to light, because even some of it that I'm not aware of, I mean, it stokes the fire, to get more involved. I'll tell you something. Since I started really getting invested in my channel, we started this show, certain things behind the scenes, how we're working and putting things together. I haven't had much time to do a lot of things I had been doing before because I'm so invested in that. But I feel like I got a purpose and a direction I've been pointing in, and you guys are making that more and more crystal clear for me as I continue to do these things and be a part of this process with you.
Thank you, brother. I feel the exact same way. The thing with me with this, I can't see the chat, so I can't give any shout outs to the chat. But I want to definitely thank everybody in the chat for participating. Hopefully when I review this, I can see some members in the chat and I can get back to them. If you have any questions, you have any things that you're having problems figuring out as far as boxing, hit one of us up. Hit one of us up. We'd be more than happy to try and answer those questions for you. That's what this panel is about. And all my subscribers on my channel, I want to give great thanks to you all because you keep it going. I don't know. I lost some subscribers. I don't know for what reason, but if there's anything you'd like for me to do differently, anything else you'd like for me to do, let me know. Let me know. But salute to everybody on the chat.
Yeah, I want to thank the chat, man. We thank you guys, for your questions. You guys know boxing, man. I look at the chat and I be like, I would say something like that. Lalala D is everywhere. She's the queen. We got a lot of respect for both and everybody, man. Broderick Hunter, I see underrated darkness, Cypher Supreme with his questions, man, Stormy B put this thing together, man. So me and Scrap, we had to support him, man, because these brothers know boxing. You can listen to them, man. And they know boxing. And we needed I'm glad that we have a platform like this so we can share our knowledge, and we can come together as a brotherhood and sisterhood, and and congregate with one another and talk this boxing, man. I mean, we got some good fights today, and I want everybody to enjoy the fights, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So big ups to Stormy B, man, for putting this together, and Scrap as well. So I'm just glad to be aboard.
Well, before we get ready to wrap things up, there is a question that Broderick Hunter, shout out to Broderick, posed, and he said, question to anyone. Is Thomas Hearns suffering from any illness? He did not look well at the Spence Garcia promo. You guys want to take that?
Yeah, he didn't look well. I'm very worried about Tommy Hearns, man. I got a soft spot for Tommy Hearns, man. He had that stare that I didn't like. His motor skills seems to be lacking, man, and unfortunately, um, he just have the look that's not right. When you look at Sugar Ray Leonard, how vibrant he is, and talking, even though he's a terrible announcer, but Tommy Hearns doesn't look well at all, man. And just shout out to Tommy Hearns for all the great fights, man. I love Tommy Hearns. One of my favorite fighters, man. So boxing, I mean, he paid his dues, man, and they give their life. And as fans, we want them to do this, we want them to do that. We look to them as superheroes, man, and sometimes we forget they're human just like us.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to speak on that as well. I don't want to prejudge anyone's medical condition until we know facts, but absolutely, the eyes tell a story. I remember when he was knocked out. I was at the fight at in Las Vegas when he was knocked out by Iran Barkley, and you can see his eyes. The eyes tell the story, and that was back then. That was, I think, it was '88, if I'm corrected, and
Yep.
it didn't look good then, but Hearns was, he started out as welterweight and went way up as far as cruiserweight. And, he was in there with some bombers. So hopefully for Thomas Hearns, that he pulls through and salute him and give us some great thrills. But no, you're right. He didn't look very good when I saw him, at that press conference.
And we have J.A. Dixon who wanted to add, I want the guys to fight the good fights, good hard fights, and get paid well, and don't get bumped down for losing when that happens. I think more guys will test themselves and the sport will take off again. I guess what J.A. Dixon is saying is that even in the competitive matches, if a guy takes a loss, people shouldn't just shame him or throw dirt on them because they may have suffered a loss. Stepping up to a challenge and then not necessarily prevailing is not the end of the road. You know, you take your lumps and you come back. You know, I once used this analogy of like you get all dressed up, dudded up for Easter, right? And you go and you step out and you slip and you fall down in some mud. Are you just gonna lay there for the rest of the day and cry that, oh, I ruined my Easter suit? Or you gonna get up, go get cleaned up, and go in the house and put something else on? It might not have been that suit you wanted to wear that Easter, but you're not gonna lay in that mud hole all day, right?
That's
So
correct.
you have to make adjustments. So a fighter that is fighting in tough competitive matches, you fight enough of them, you'll win some, you'll lose some. What do you have to say on that, guys, before we close out?
Yeah, absolutely. I always go by the motto: "It's the man in the suit, not the suit in the man." So regardless of how dirty that suit is, they got money from the slip and fall. The man himself is he's the buying power. He's the person that's going to make it happen. So just because you have a defeat doesn't mean that you are a failure. And that's why I do these fisticuff series, because I have to salute these fighters. I mean, you look at Thomas Hearns, the question was asked about his condition. We have to pay homage to those who actually gave us thrills, gave us what we wanted, represented the sport that they're in. So, you know, because you took a loss has nothing to do with it. It's about what you do when you come back from a loss. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I want to say it's to me, boxing is like this. When you fight good fighters, you're eventually going to lose. It's the nature of the sport. A loss is not the end of the world. Like Scrap said, you come back. That's why, if Charlo beat Harrison, I'm going to be so impressed with Charlo. Hey, listen, it happens, man. You lose, even though I thought he won, but I'm just talking about in general terms. You lose, you live to fight another day. That's it. But we live in a society now that, you lose one. He wasn't ever this and that. He ain't that good. And that's just unfortunately in 2019, that's how people think. But you can come back from a loss. I mean, Canelo lost to Mayweather, and he's back. I mean, that's kind of different, but because he came off a draw too, but he's still fighting at a high level, so you can do it as well.
But and the thing is, to piggyback off that, Curtis, even if Charlo loses a second time to this man, sometimes you have a guy just has your number. Doesn't mean that you're not a quality fighter. He has to continue to fight. He can't complain. He has to get in there, fight more often. He has to watch films and he has to make adjustments. It has nothing to do with the fact that he may not look what he's done up until that point. So that's what we're saying. You know, these great fighters in the past, if you look at their records, they have had losses, but look at the wins they had. Look what they accomplished from the wins that they had, and that's all it is.
Stormy, I think Stormy stepped away, but I'm just glad, man, that you there, Stormy?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
You can go ahead and say what you're gonna say, but I have something I want to drop too. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm finished. I was just covering while you was away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought I was open, but my mic was muted because I was talking. uh, I Now it's time for us to just go into that last part that I had told Kurt earlier, where we can recommend some fights to people before we sign off. And Hustler Slim gives us a great segue into that by this comment. He says, just finished the Chacon and Lyman fight. Wow, Bobby finally dropped him in the 15th. Bobby Chacon was a dog of all dogs in this fight, even after being dropped time after time. Great suggestion. So see there, just like Hyphy, we have another personality from our chat who went and checked the fight for himself. And when he wrote wow, he wrote it with all caps and multiple W's. So it was impressive. So you brothers got some fights you want to lay on our listeners for this weekend that they may want to take time out. Just maybe Kurt, you drop two. Scrap, you drop two.
Yes. There's a fight with Kevin Kelly versus Alejandro Gonzalez. His nickname was Cobrita. Go watch that fight. Kevin Kelly versus Alejandro Gonzalez. And there's another fight. Let me give you Derek Jefferson versus Maurice Harris, a friend of mine from Newark. It was an HBO fight. Once again, that's Derek Jefferson versus Maurice Harris. Two great fights.
Oh,
Okay,
those are great fights, Curtis. Oh man, those are great fights. The choices I have, I'm going back 1950s on one of them, and that was Charlie Marcus and Danny Dardico. I suggest you watch that fight, and for several reasons. Character, the brink of destruction, making a comeback. That fight is unbelievable. And the other fight would be Kevin Kelly versus Troy Dorsey. I had the pleasure of being at that fight. It was at the Felt Forum. I was in second row, sitting actually first row, sitting next to Buddy McGirt. And I'll just say this: watch that fight. Unbelievable fight. So those two fights, Charlie Norcus, Danny Nardico, and Kevin Kelly and Troy Dorsey are my two choices for this weekend.
All right. And I have two that I would like to drop, and they're featuring the same fighter in both fights. The first would be James Lights Out Tony against Reggie Johnson. And that's a middleweight championship fight from the 90s. And it'll also be James Lights Out Tony against Mike, the body snatcher McCallum. Mike McCallum. Those two fights are two great middleweight mix-ups, great mesh of styles, good boxing matches. One is pretty much a throwback. You could put it in black and white and you think you're in the 40s or 50s watching it. So that's what I have to recommend for these people out there. James Toney against Reggie Johnson, James Toney against Mike McCallum.
Oh, great choice. That's awesome. Those are awesome fights.
And there is one last question. I'd like to squeeze that in, and then we can sign off, brothers. One of them ones media had a question about: do you think if the '84 Olympians would have fared as well had the Cubans been allowed to participate?
That's a very good question. Very good question. It would have been tough, but I would say the '84 Olympic team still would have been successful because they were special fighters. Because you've seen what happened in the pros, they're Hall of Famers, not Mildred Taylor, but that's, Pernell Whitaker and Evander Holyfield. They definitely would have been, Holyfield didn't get the gold, but he should have. And Pernell Whitaker, one of the best amateur fighters, ever. But my answer is that they would have been successful. Maybe there would have been a hiccup here or two, but you're fighting Cuban fighters that's a lot more experience. But when you have special skill like the '84 or the '76 Olympic team, they was going to be successful. So good question. I say, yeah, they would have been successful. The '84 Olympic team.
Yeah, I have to say I agree, but that's why I have to give the notch to the '76 Olympic team because they did fight the Cubans. But the '84 Olympic team, you had some great fighters on that team. But that's unfortunate. They didn't get that opportunity, so we could have seen what would have happened because you still had Stevenson still around, Theophilus Stevenson, and some other great middleweights in the Cubans division as well. But I don't know. I have to give it to the seven. I know this wasn't the question, but the '76 Olympic team showed a lot when they fought the Cubans. '84 didn't get that opportunity to show us that. But I think they would have been successful regardless as well.
All right. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to begin to wrap up our Three Wise Men of Boxing episode number 2. Um, we want to thank everyone in the chat for your questions, for your participations, suggestions. Um, we want you to come back. Please continue to support the channel, continue to support this show, this content, because this is something that you don't have every day, especially if you're an aficionado of boxing, the sport of boxing. You can get the real, true essence of the sport from these scholars that are participating on this panel. Um, Kurt, would you like to let everyone know where they could follow you? And then Scrap, you take it from there.
Absolutely. You can follow me on World Breaker Fighting, and 2:30 Eastern, Monday through Friday. Sometimes at night we try to do 2 shows a night. Plus, I have a offshoot show there called Kurt Sugar versus the World. You can find me there. That's under World Breaker Fighting. Subscribe to that channel. Get us over 2,000. Man, I want to just thank Stormy B, man, and Scrap, man, because even though I'm part of the panel, hey, I'm still learning. And I think the chat, man, your questions was fire. Your anticipation, support us, be with us, man, and, tell somebody else to, subscribe to the channel, Stormy B, man, and Scrapbook, and we're going to bring you some more great content and great shows in the very near future. Salute to everybody.
Yeah, salute to everybody in the panel. Like I said, I can't see the chat for some reason. It's not showing up on my screen. But everybody in the chat, much love to you. Thanks for giving your time. This is a Saturday. I'm sure you have a lot of things to do, but you took the time to give it to us. And for that reason, we are forever grateful. I want to thank the panel. Curtis, man, it's always a pleasure being on the panel with you. I can never not learn anything listening to you. And that's real talk. Stormy B, thanks for putting this panel together. Same thing with you, man. You always come out with some wisdom. And the thing is with you, you hit it from a different perspective, from a trainer's perspective. And that makes the panel complete because we all have different avenues that we bring to the table. And I really appreciate chatting with you guys. And hopefully, we will continue with this and we get a bigger audience, support this channel, support Stormy B, support World Breaker, support Curtis Anderson. It's very important that we stick together on these platforms. I was younger. I always wanted to know if I can be a part of a roundtable discussion. I am now part of one, and I'm appreciative. So let's keep this going. Thanks to everyone in the chat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of another episode of the Three Wise Men of Boxing. We really thank everyone who was a part of this process with us today. And from here going forward, we will have more for you. Please hit us up. Let us know what you want to hear from us. You can reach me here on the Stormy B Man channel. Please leave comments on my videos because I'm dropping content all the time. And if you're out there and you like what you're hearing or like what you're listening, please just leave some comments, and I read everything. So, I'm friendly and open. I'm not gonna insult somebody just because they don't agree or share the same opinion or insight that I might have. So I welcome it all. So with that being said, this is the Three Wise Men of Boxing, episode number 2. Salute to everyone. Salute to the panel. And we're going to say peace.
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 Stand along, fellas. Hello?
Yeah, Curtis, I'm here.
Oh, okay.